The talk today that I've prepared for you is really on this concept of letting go. And that is, what are some of the things that we can really be doing to try and help our children make the transition to adulthood? I know that some of you, I've worked with some of your children, and so I know we have all different levels here. We have different ages and different levels. And the same techniques obviously aren't going to work for all children, because some children are going to be able to get a driver's license, go to college, get married, have kids, and live completely independently. And other children might continue to need some type of supported employment. They might need to live in an environment where somebody's checking in on them, or they might need to have assisted living types of arrangements. And so there isn't one answer to all of this. But what I'm going to try and do is just outline for you some of the things that we should be looking at. The one thing that I'm going to steer a little bit clear of is housing, because I'm not a housing expert, and so I know that there's a lot of questions about, well, where will my child live, and that's just one area that I don't have a lot of knowledge on, so I have a little bit of information that I can share with you. But what I wanted to start off by doing is, it just so happens that I'm not sure if it was yesterday or the day before, there was a little blog post by a parent who has a young son, or I guess he would be a young man, in college, who just started college, and she wrote about the difficulty with this transition between high school and college, and how she thought her son was prepared and what had happened. So I just wanted to read a little bit to you, because I think it fits in exactly with what I'm talking about. The beginning of her post just sort of outlined how, what IDEA and how you can continue to get accommodations in college, and then she goes on to say, my son has autism and was covered under IDEA for the entirety of his elementary and secondary education. Caring teams hammered out every detail, and thankfully Ben graduated from high school with a standard diploma with the hopes of attending college to study journalism. While transitioning to college work life was covered in the IEP his senior year, it really did nothing to prepare him for the expectations soon to follow as he began his first year at community college. We registered with the Office of Disabilities and were promised grand things in the way of support. Ben received accommodation letters to give to his instructors and was told it's up to him whether he wants to give those letters to the professors or not. And this is something that happens with many of my clients. They're told it's up to you whether you want to give this, and if they don't give the letter to their professors, they don't get any accommodations and they don't get any help. So there's not a standard thing at college where you're identified as a child and then all of the professors know. So Ben chose not to give the letters to his professors because he wants to be known for his work and not his disability. So all through the majority of his first semester, the mom worked hard with Ben to organize his assignments, but he was left to create and submit them on his own. And I'm going to kind of skip along, and says when he did an assignment that he thought he had done very well on, when the assignments were handed back, Ben was asked to stay after class. He was absolutely positive he was going to be congratulated for such a wonderful paper, and he was dumbfounded when the professor says, I don't believe that these are your words, and asked him to rewrite the paper on a subject that was not as dark. Okay? We all know many of the things that our students are into. This happened to have been a book report that he wrote on a comic book. That probably did have some dark themes, as we know. Ben became very confused, and he was unable to speak because of the anxiety that developed. He did not protest or defend his work. People with autism often do not react to stressful situations in similar ways as their neurotypical counterparts, and the professor, unfamiliar with autism, thought Ben's silence was his admission of guilt. Later, I asked Ben why he did not defend himself. Ben said, he's a teacher. I'm not supposed to question him. Okay. After so many years of teams of adults eager to see him succeed, helping him with every step of his education, he was unprepared to deal with a situation which required him to defend himself on his own. With my assistance, he wrote the professor and asked the professor to write down the words that he thought were not his and why he felt it was too dark. And then Ben handed it in to the professor, and the professor refused and did not respond to the child or to the student's emails. The mom then wrote to the professor in a very respectful way with a message and asked for Ben's permission. I explained how verbal communication is sometimes hard for those students with autism, and that would he please take a minute and write down his comments so that Ben would understand them better. The professor did not respond, but I did receive a phone call from the Office of Disabilities notifying me that the professor had complained about my interference. The director scolded me for contacting the professor and said Ben would need to learn to stand up for himself. Okay? And you guys have all probably heard this, that this transition to college can be so difficult because parents oftentimes are not allowed to become involved. That your child is now an adult, they are 18 years old, they are expected to be able to handle and navigate all of this on their own, and it's extremely confusing. And one of the things that we're going to talk about are some of these real significant differences between high school and college, even a community college. It doesn't have to be Harvard, even just a community college. So many things are different that our children might not really be prepared to handle, and there are some colleges that just will not allow parental involvement. There are some colleges that do. I think more and more colleges are now becoming more aware potentially of the need for some parental involvement. But the overriding response from those colleges right now is the student is an adult, they need to approach us, they need to advocate for themselves, and we only want to hear from the student. So, as I said before, there really is no single right way for us to look at helping our child become more independent. But the one thing that I think goes without saying is that it is never too early to start. And that is, you should kind of always be aware of what can I do to help facilitate some level of independence in my child at this exact moment for whatever task it is. So even if it's just learning how to set the table, even if it's just learning how to cut his own food or something like that, all of that will ultimately help produce more and more independence. So, it's not something where you just want to say, oh, he's a senior now, how are we going to get him to be independent? And I know most of you don't. A lot of you, when I see a child at the age of 3 or 4, the parents will kind of say, and what do I do when he gets older? And where is she going to go? Will she be able to go to college? Will she be able to graduate high school? So I know for a lot of parents, it's foremost on your mind from the very beginning. I think when I look at this concept of sort of letting go and helping produce independence, I really kind of take a two-folded approach. And that is, first of all, I like to think about and have other people working with the children reflect on what did it take for us to be independent? Because most of us all did it. We all thought when we were 16 years old, if you're as old as I am, and you got your driver's license on your 16th birthday, that I was completely capable and totally responsible to drive at the age of 16. And I would have argued to death with my parents if they said, no, you have to wait. I got my driver's license on my 16th birthday, and right now, I don't think anybody should be able to drive until they're about 30. So my mindset changed very much, but at that time, I was convinced that I was capable of handling all of this. And they did rely on my parents to remind me of all the dangers that were out there on the road. And the fact is that I might think I know what I'm doing, but that doesn't mean other people on the road know what they're doing. The decision was, I'm just going to try it again. I'm not going to ask my parents for help. I'll turn to my peers for help. I'll turn to a mentor for help or something like that. But I want to prove to my parents that I'm able to be independent. So what did it take for you to be independent? And then you think about what are all of the current skills that you think your child would need to be independent. So what are the things? Can your child navigate the community independently? Can your child make decisions for themselves? Are they motivated to become independent? Because I work with many clients who have no problem saying to me, I'm fine sitting in mom's basement for the rest of my life. As long as I have a cell phone and an Xbox, I'm happy. And, and obviously some of that comes from fear of failure, which we understand. A lot of us had that. But there are some kids who just aren't, mom and dad are the ones that are saying, well, go, go, go. And the child is like, no, I want to stay. Where I think a lot of us think of kids really wanting to spread their wings. And with our population, they may or may not be there yet. But think about, what are the things that they really need to do right now, this minute, regardless of whether your child is 5, your child is 15, your child is 25, whatever it is. What are the things? What is, the number one thing that you would like to see them become more independent in? And that's the area that you're going to target and start teaching those independent skills. And really being able to sit back and ask yourself, what would make my child happy? Because, we all have dreams for our kids, right? Like my son's going to become a neurosurgeon and my daughter apparently is going to be an Olympic gymnast, whatever. That's what would make them really happy. Are either one of those things reasonable goals? I don't know. I mean, probably not. I don't know so much about the Olympic gymnastics stuff, but these are the goals. What would make them happy? Being able to pursue some of this, being able to go and take a beginning biology class or something like that might be something that would be interesting to these children. What would make your child happy? So, a lot of kids will say to me when I say, what are your goals for the future? You can guess that the overwhelming majority say, I want to be a video game designer. I want to be a character animator, like I want to be able to do anime and stuff like that. Okay, and then I said, well, what are the skills you need to do that job? I don't know. You just have to like it. And I was like, no, actually, you do need some skills to have every one of these jobs. And so helping the kids figure out, okay, if you know what you think is going to make you happy, then what are the things you think you need in order to get there? And then we can again start to build our programs and our steps based on what does the child think that they need in order to make themselves happy? What would make them happy? But we also have a population who oftentimes will say, I don't know what would make me happy. I don't know what I want. And the fact is that's true. A lot of our kids really, they just don't know because so far they haven't had a lot of experience with a bunch of different types of jobs and things like that. And they think it's sweet. A lot of times kids will say, well, I want to be a teacher because their teacher is the one that's been so helpful to them. Or I want to be a therapist because they know that it's their therapist that's helped them learn these different things, which is all great. And those are all the things that we need to be able to say, okay, is that reasonable? Do we think? We never know for sure, but do we think? And if not, what is something similar? What is something within that realm that the child could do? So for instance, I have a client who spent many years insisting that he was going to become a video game designer. That's what he wanted to do because he just loves video games. And he took a few courses and realized maybe he wasn't as talented and it wasn't as easy as he thought it was going to be. He thought this was just all fun and games. And it's actually a lot of work to be a video game designer. And so when thinking about, well, what are some of the other things that you like to do, the fact is that this is a child who really likes to be a social person and he loves kind of taking people on tours and all of this kind of stuff. So then we look at, okay, potentially a good job for you is to do something where you are taking people on tours, you are explaining a company, Activision or something like that. You might be a greeter there who would take people, show them where they are. This is so-and-so's office that you have an appointment with, and it would be great. And so it taps into his strengths and kind of keeps him in the video game world. And that was kind of the first time that the child really became motivated to, okay, now I want to become independent and I want to be able to do this because that sounds like a job that maybe I would like to have, and also a job that he felt was within his capabilities. Another thing, again, is that you want to be able to kind of understand or think about what are the strengths that your child has and what are the skills that they need to, again, achieve whatever it is that they're stating they want to achieve. If your child is able to tell you, this is what I want to be, even if it might not be a job. Again, it might just be, I want to live on my own. I want to have a girlfriend. That's what a lot of the clients say to me too. I just want to have a girlfriend, or I want to have a boyfriend. It's like, okay, well then we're going to focus on that because that is a step toward independence. Being able to go out on a date potentially independently, or even calling the girl and saying, would you like to go bowling? That's a step toward independence. That's great. That's what we're going to focus on because that's where the motivation is at that moment. And then what are the obstacles that are standing in the way? What are the things that you think might prevent your child from being able to become independent, achieve whatever goal it is that they have set for themselves? And then again, that's where we start teaching. We say, okay, I see that you really want to be able to have a girlfriend, but you don't yet know how to ask for somebody's phone number. You're uncomfortable talking on the phone, so we're going to start with helping you with that, just making phone calls. Okay? Some of the things that we focus on when we're looking at the road to independence is obviously where is the child going to live? Is the child going to be living outside of the home? Hopefully, most of you would like your child to ultimately move out of the house. And so if so, what are the types of living environments that are going to be available to your child? And then what are the skills they're going to need to live in those different independent living environments? Does your child want to attend higher education, whether it's college, whether it's a trade school? Some kids do want to go to college, some kids don't want to go to college, and that's perfectly fine. Nowadays there are a lot of tech schools and things like that that our students, our clients, our children do really well at. One thing that I think is really important is being able to navigate the community. And so we talk a lot about driving. A lot of the kids that I work with really would like to get their driver's license, but it might be something that they're not going to be able to do. They might not be able to pass the test. They might not be able to have the attention, or they don't have the attention skills to be able to truly drive on the road. But that's really their goal. And so what then we encourage those children to do is to think about, okay, if you don't have your driver's license, how can you independently get from one place to the next? What are your other options? Are you comfortable taking the bus? Are you comfortable with access? Are you comfortable, is it something that you can ride your bike or something, depending on how far away it is? But also navigating the community by being able to do your own banking. I think it's really important that when kids start to get some money of their own, whether it's through an allowance that you might give them, whether it's just through money that they get through their birthdays or whatever, that they get their own bank account. And again, this can be a true bank account. It can be a bank account that you're just working on in the home. Like, okay, here's your check. You're going to deposit it. I'm going to give you a receipt. We're going to have written out how much money you have. You want to buy a new video game, or you want to buy something. Here's how much it costs. Let's do the math together if they can't do it, so that they get used to this is how banking and independence works, and they start to become aware of finances. Because a lot of our kids really have absolutely no idea what anything costs, which is another big thing about understanding how to navigate the community. So in my young adult group, we do an activity where we kind of talk about what are some of the things that you need if you want to live alone, what are some of the things that you might need to buy, and what are some of the things you need to pay for. So the kids will say, well, I need to buy toothpaste, and I need to buy soda, and I need to be able to, they usually forget about the fact that like you have to pay for your wireless service and all these things that parents may have been paying for all along. So sometimes the children have no idea how much any of this costs. So we say, let's estimate how much all this costs, okay? And then we go to the grocery store and we compare. How much really does a tube of toothpaste cost versus how much does rent for an apartment cost? And how much does it cost for wireless? How much will a prepaid card really get you? Because you are texting 230 times a day. So how much is it? How long will that how much money do you really need? Because money, there might not be an endless supply. I think a lot of our goals for some of our kids might be that they can become financially independent, or at least get a better sense of, okay, that all of this stuff just isn't free. Cable costs money. So if you want to be able to do this, Netflix costs money. All of this stuff costs money, and that money has to come from somewhere, and they need to be able to understand this. And I think they should understand it way before we start looking at sending them off into the community. A lot of times I have clients 20 years old, and they say, oh yeah, my doctor wants to change my medication. Oh, who's your doctor? I don't know. Okay, this is something, again, that I think all kids should know. They should know the names of their doctors. If they have difficulty remembering them, it can be put into their phone so that they're able to access it, because there might be a time when somebody important will say, well, we want to be able to contact your doctor, and they should be able to call up that information even if they don't know it right off the top of their head. But they should have all that information, because that's something, to me, that's going to be very important. And then, can they go to events by themselves? Can they even let you know, hey, there's a dance at the school and I want to go? Or is this a situation where you get the flyer from the school, you say, hey, there's a dance at the school, why don't you go? And the child says, well, I didn't know anything about the dance, or something like that. So again, we would really want to encourage the kids to look around at the signs in the school when they advertise a dance, when they advertise. One of my clients today was talking about, they just had cookie decorating during lunch, and it happened to be at the same time as his social skills group. And he said he was really conflicted because he really wanted to decorate cookies, but that's what his social skills group was. And he problem solved very nicely and said, I paid for the cookie decorating, so I think I need to do that instead of social skills. And he was told, why don't you go decorate a cookie and then come back? And he was quite satisfied with that. But so we allowed him to kind of problem solve on his own. Great, you want to do something, decorate cookies, but you have an obligation. How can you help solve that problem? Because these things are going to happen. Again, planning events, going to this, being able to shop on their own. Obviously, in order to be independent, your child needs to have good organizational skills if they're going to be living on their own. And for me, in this case, organization really is can your child get done what needs to get done? So, are they able to get their homework done? Are they able to get their chores in? Are they able to balance if they're going to a social skills group, if they've still got speech and language therapy, if they're going to some other type of therapy and a music lesson and everything? Can they balance all of that? Or is it the situation where they just feel completely overwhelmed at the end of the day? Like, I've just got so much to do and I've got no downtime and all of that kind of stuff. Because as an independent adult, they would be able to make the decision, I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed, I think I'm going to stop going to yoga or something like that. And potentially working with the kids on prioritizing of the things that you do, which ones give you the most pleasure, which ones don't. And maybe if this is becoming too difficult and schoolwork or something is suffering, then what's the one that you might be able to drop out of? Even though obviously, most likely we wouldn't say, well, it can be speech therapy or behavioral therapy if that's really what they need, then those things might not be options. But some of the extracurricular activities could be options. Sustaining employment. Again, our goal for all of our kids are that somehow they're able to be employed on some level. And again, this can be something where they're working in, with an aide to do a job, that they're working independently, that they're working at McDonald's, that they're working at, Activision, that they're working at JPL. There's a million different job opportunities. But we want our kids to start to develop job skills and employment readiness skills as early as possible. Finding a social circle and being able to have a support system is really important too. And I think once your child becomes a quote-unquote adult, so 18, I think it's really important that they do find a social circle so that they can turn around and talk to peers, or they have people to call, they have people to invite to go to the movies and everything. If that's, again, the things that they're interested in doing, that they do have a peer group that they're able to do that with. And sometimes for kids, when high school is over, they lose all of their peers because everybody kind of disperses and they go places. And I have a client right now who's in, a pretty severe depression because he said, he had a lot of neurotypical friends. They all went away and he's the only one who's still here. And he said, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to make friends because my friends have always been the people in my class, but I don't have a class anymore. So how do you meet people? And that's a really difficult situation because think about it. How do you meet somebody when you don't have school anymore? If you don't have a job and you don't go to school, how do you meet new people? How do you find new friends? And he's really struggling with this concept. So that's something where we have to talk about what are the things you can do to meet people. How do you meet people that like the same things that you like and everything? And then I think the other big thing for me is understanding and accepting the difference between seeking help and having someone handle the issue for them. So I do still have a lot of clients who will say things. I just had a session with a client today who was talking about difficulties that he has with a math teacher. And I said, I think that you should go to the math teacher and explain what the problem is. And the math teacher has now said, I'll give you 5 minutes at the end of every class to talk to me. And he said, well, I still need to talk to my mom and I need to talk to, my special education teacher. And I said, why? I said, you just told me what the problem was. We've problem solved it. And I knew what it was. It was, well, some adult will say, we'll talk to the math teacher for you. And that to me is not going to be helpful to him. He understands what the problem is. He has the ability to go to the teacher. It is anxiety provoking for him, and I understand that. But that's why it's like, well, let's practice. Let's practice what you're going to say, and then you go off and say it. And they said, you've got the safety net. If this doesn't work out, if you don't get the answers that you wanted, I'm there, Miss Martin's there, your mom's there. We'll all be there to step in and support you. But you try it on your own first. And it's very scary. But again, a lot of these kids are so used to mom and dad and therapist or somebody coming in and saying it for them when they're perfectly capable of saying it for themselves. And we need to give them that opportunity to say it for themselves. I think we have to look at the safety net that we have under our kids, and we need to remember that we need to make it smaller and smaller, and we then need to start to pull it further and further away. It's not one fell swoop. It's not, guess what, you're 18, bye. That's not what I'm talking about. But I am talking about things like taking a situation where a child is able to say, here's my issue, and saying, okay, now that you know what it is, you be the one that goes to talk to the teacher. Or that we're saying to the children, you did the work, you hand it in, I'm not going to come with you and hand it in. Here's a note to give to your teacher. Or can you please copy this, write it in your own handwriting and give it to the teacher. Whatever level the child can do so that they are kind of in control, they're taking charge. And it's not you writing a letter and the child doesn't even ever see it or know anything about what the content of the letter is, and that goes to the teacher. The child should know what the content of that letter is. To whatever degree they can understand it, especially if it's something that's to help them, because ultimately we want them to know what they need and how they can do all of this. All kids need to start to understand and experience natural consequences. And unfortunately, sometimes failure is a part of life. Sometimes we try something and we're not successful. We apply for a job and we don't get it. We ask somebody out and they say no. And this is all just part of life. And I think oftentimes as a parent of children with special needs, we try to prevent that failure. And it's understandable, but it's also not realistic in order to produce a child who can really be independent. We need to let our kids sometimes just experience natural consequences. So again, a client of mine who, her mom got to the point where she said, okay, you know what? You know how to set an alarm clock. You set your alarm clock, you get up, you get ready to go to school. And the child slept through the alarm and didn't get up and all this kind of stuff. And the mom said, well, go to school anyway. And she wound up, being told, you have had too many tardies, and if it happens 2 more times, you're going to be asked to leave the program, which she didn't want to do. And then the motivation kicked in to try and get herself out of bed. But her mom said, if I hadn't done this, I would have had to continue to wake her up until, the day that she leaves the house. And even then, the mom was saying, I don't think she would be able to get herself up, even though she can set an alarm. It's that concept of, they set the alarm, they turn it off, go back to sleep, which all of us have done at some point. But we've all experienced the consequences, and we don't like the consequences, so therefore we say to ourselves, you know what, like I say to my clients all the time, it's like I have taught myself when my alarm goes off, the first thing I do is get out of bed. Because if I so much as lay there to even think about, okay, well, what do I want to wear today? I'm not going to get out of bed. So it's, you have to come up with your own strategies, what works for you, and you have to make sure that you do it. So I think we need to start to feel comfortable to kind of let the chips fall where they may, okay? If your child is really running late, oftentimes we have a tendency to kind of be like, well, okay, we'll say, well, he was really stressed this morning, and you'll be the one maybe to give the excuse or to go in and talk to the teacher or something. But that's the time when I think, unless, of course, it's your fault that the child is late, but if it's because the child was dilly-dallying around or whatever it is, then the child should be able to say, I don't want to put my shoes on. Okay? These are the natural consequences, because that's really why you were late. Or I've said to lots of parents, you know what? Put them in the car in their pajamas, because they don't want to go to school in their pajamas. And the minute they see that you're serious, that you're saying, this is your duty to go to school on time. That is your responsibility. That's your job right now as a student. Your job is to get to school on time. And I'm going to do my job, which is to drive you there on time. You didn't have your shoes on, you're going to have to go to school with no shoes. Now, of course, you probably should have shoes or extra clothes in the car, because your child will be like, oh, I don't want to do this. But there's many times when one time of saying, okay, then let's go to school in your pajamas. That's the last time that the child, says, I won't put my clothes on, because they don't want to go to school. Again, your child might be like, that's fine, I'll go to school in my pajamas. Then again, that's up to you to be like, okay, do I want to truly send my child to school in the pajamas? Is there something else I can do to motivate them to get ready? But it's never too early to say to your kids, this is the expectation. You need to be ready when it's time for us to leave. And that, again, and I would use the terminology of this is your job, because that way they start to understand I have jobs, and jobs have parameters, and they don't always bend for employees. They just don't always bend. Some jobs will, most jobs won't. Another thing that oftentimes we have to look at is, again, kind of what is our dream for our child, and does it match our child's reality? But also, for some children, it's helping them adjust their dream to their reality. So again, I work with parents and clients on kind of trying to determine if they want this job, what are the skills that are really needed for that job. So while you and your child might need to adjust what their dreams are, you might also need to increase your expectations. That oftentimes your child can truly be more independent and can handle a little bit more stress or a little bit more difficulties than we think. And because we're just so afraid of our children ever experiencing kind of that negative experience of failing or whatever, that we don't always allow them to show us how independent they can be and what they really are capable of doing. When we say, I know you can do it, you know what do you want to say to your teacher? And I'll write down your words for you, but what do you want to say? And whatever the child says, that's what you write down. So the child starts to feel like, hey, I do have this ability, I can express myself in whatever capacity that is. But I think one thing that does always stick in the back of my mind is the issue of safety. Because a lot of times when I talk with parents about, okay, what's the next step we can take with the child, safety is a big concern, particularly for those of you who have female children, where we really do worry about, okay, here's this 20-year-old, and I'm going to be sticking her on a bus, and maybe she's going to be going to something and it ends at 8:30 at night, and I really don't feel comfortable. And we wouldn't potentially with any 20-year-old female, having her stand by the bus stop all by herself or something like that. That, I do still want to pick my daughter up, and I do still want to provide some level of protection for her. And so the independence has to be balanced with safety. And teaching safety skills as early as possible is really important. And that is, again, the concept of stranger danger and who should you talk to and who shouldn't you talk to, making sure that your child knows exactly what to do should they feel uncomfortable in any situation, what are kind of like the safety words. So if your child is at a bus stop or they're even at a school dance and they're feeling uncomfortable because somebody is following them or whatever, that they can call you and they can have a code word with you, because the person that's bothering them might be standing right there. So they can call you and they can say things like, oh, I think I left the oven on, whatever it is. And that's your code that, your child is feeling really uncomfortable at that moment and feels unsafe. And so, of course, then you would want to step in, or you would want to call one of the chaperones or somebody at the dance to say, can you check in, make sure, separate, get that boy away from my daughter, whatever it is. But it's not just girls that are victimized. So certainly boys can be too. And it gets scary for any parent to think, my kid's going to go off all by themselves and be able to navigate this. But we have to start to let them, even if we're following, like 10 paces behind and then 20 paces behind. And then it's like, after they round the corner, we wait a few minutes and then we just check on, we wait to make sure that they get into the building safely. And then we wait outside for them. However that would work for you. And then the other thing is that there are different cultures and different family values. And so I had a client in my young adult group who his family was actually quite happy with having him continue to live at home. They didn't really have a desire for him to live outside of the home, and there's nothing wrong with that. That was the family's culture, that was the family's values, that's what the family wanted. And it's not for me to say, well, you need to have this boy move out of the house and everything. Instead it was, okay, well, what do you want him to be able to accomplish then independently? And it came down to, well, we want him to be able to pick up the phone and call people and make plans to do things on his own. But, whether he ever gets a job and stuff like that didn't really matter to them. And that was their decision. The young man himself said to me, I don't need to have a job. I'm perfectly fine. I love my parents. I like being at home. He had chores in the house that he had to do, and that was fine. So then our goal really became much more of a social goal, and became also somewhat of an independence goal. So for instance, I'll give you an example of another thing. With this client that speaks toward independence and the things that we need to make sure are being worked on. His parents did want him to become independent in the sense that they would give him a list of things at the supermarket. They drove him to the supermarket, they gave him money, and they said, go pick up these items. And he liked that. He loved being in supermarkets. So he went and he picked out the items, and his parents had given him $20, and the items came to something like 21 something. And he had absolute panic because he didn't have enough money. So he wound up saying, I'm sorry, I can't buy this, and he left. And our training then became, wait a minute, it was $21 and something cents. Instead of leaving everything there and coming home with no groceries at all, what may have been another choice that you could have made? And it was difficult for him to see that you could have just taken one item, kind of picked out what's the least important thing here, which would probably be the fruit or the vitamins for, a 20-year-old male, and put it back, and then you could have bought all the other groceries. So he, again, his parents said, wow, we had no idea that he wouldn't know what to do if he didn't quite have enough money. And he just literally walked out of the store, didn't, it's like, oh, I'm sorry, and just left. So, these are the kind of things that when we do let our kids be independent, we see where their difficulties are, and then you work with your team on, okay, let's teach and build up those skills.